So, when I say musical improvisation, what pops into your head? Maybe a jazz musician just lost in a blistering solo in some smoky club? Or maybe it's just someone kind of making stuff up as they go along. Well, it turns out it's so much more than that. Musical improvisation is actually one of the oldest, most powerful forms of human expression. In this explainer, we're going to break down what it is, how it works, and why it might just be the key to unlocking a deeper connection with music, and maybe even with ourselves.
To really get improvisation, let's start where it seems to have gone missing. This quote from trumpeter Joshua McClure. Wow, it's fiery. Creatively constipated, neurotic, terrified of making mistakes, and joyless. Those are some strong words, but they get you thinking, right? If this is how some performers feel, what vital piece of the puzzle has been lost from the music? And that question leads us right into our first section. Is improvisation a lost art? Especially in the classical world, where it used to be king. You know, you'd be forgiven for thinking classical music has always been about hitting every single note perfectly. But believe it or not, the giants, we're talking Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, they weren't just composers. They were legendary improvisers. Their concerts were famous for these incredible on-the-spot creations. Mozart and Beethoven even had public improv battles. Now, contrast that with a lot of modern orchestras, where everyone is glued to the written score and a single wrong note can feel like the end of the world. Spontaneity has often been pushed aside for perfection. I mean, talk about a huge cultural shift. Okay, so while it might have faded in some corners of the music world, improvisation is anything but a lost art. It's more like a universal language, one that's spoken all across the globe and throughout all of history. So, what is it exactly? Well, at its heart, improvisation is creating music as it's being performed. The best way to think about it is, it's like learning a language. You don't just memorize a dictionary, right? First, you learn the words, the grammar, the common phrases. Those are your fundamentals. And then, you use all that to have a real spontaneous conversation. You're not reading from a script, you're expressing your own unique ideas in real time. And this musical conversation, it's been going on for centuries. Flashback to the Renaissance and Baroque periods, improvising was just standard practice. Any good musician did it. Then, in the classical era, it became this incredible display of pure genius. Now, it's true, it did decline a bit in 19th century classical music when composers wanted more control. But it didn't die. Oh no. It was reborn, exploding in the 20th century with the birth of jazz, and now it's being rediscovered in traditions all over the world. And when I say all over the world, I mean everywhere. In South Asia, you've got musicians improvising within the beautiful framework of a raga. In parts of Africa, master drummers are having entire conversations through these complex interlocking rhythms. In the Middle East, a performer explores the deep emotional territory of a maqam. And of course, in jazz, it's the absolute soul of the music. It's musicians literally speaking to each other. This is not some niche skill. It's a fundamental part of our shared human story. All right, so we know what it is, and we know where it happens. But how in the world does it actually work? Let's be clear, this isn't magic, it's a craft, and it's built on a set of skills you can actually learn. Which brings us to the biggest misconception of all. Is it just making things up? You know, pulling notes out of thin air? The short answer? Nope, not at all. Even the most wild-sounding, out-there improvisation almost always happens within some kind of framework. So what does that framework look like? Well, think of it as a musician's toolkit. It's filled with these core melodic tools. For instance, an improviser might use sequences, where they take a little melodic idea and repeat it at a new pitch. Or they'll use arpeggios, which is just playing the notes of a chord one by one. They can create melodies using scalar improv, which is just the notes of the scale that fits the song. Or they might dance around a main note using neighboring tones. See, these aren't random at all. They are the vocabulary, the building blocks of improvisation. This shows that even so-called free improvisation still has some context. The composer Sandeep Bhagwati puts it perfectly. He says the really interesting stuff happens in this fertile no man's land between composition and improvisation. In other words, it's all about finding freedom inside the rules. In fact,
Bhagwati came up with a fantastic word for this: comprisation. It just perfectly captures that idea, doesn't it? That fertile ground, that dynamic space where a musician is navigating a structure, but with their own creative freedom. It isn't a choice between rules and freedom, it's getting to have both at the exact same time. And this is where things get really interesting, because this interplay, this dynamic, goes way beyond music. It's actually a model for something much deeper, a model for human connection. The philosopher Dieter Mersch said it beautifully. He suggested that the relationship between musicians who are improvising, well, it mirrors the relationship between any two people. It's a dialogue. It's built on listening, on responding, on creating something together that neither person could have created alone. And listen, this isn't just some philosophical idea. It has real practical uses in music therapy. Therapists use these same conversational techniques to help people heal. For instance, with mirroring, a therapist will actually play back a client's musical ideas to build a connection. With holding, they provide a steady, safe, musical base so the client feels free to express whatever they need to. It becomes this incredible tool for communication and healing, especially when words just aren't enough. And that's really the power of it all. Improvisation gives a shape, a voice, to feelings that might otherwise be stuck inside, unspoken. It lets us tap into our inner world, our raw emotions, and express them in a way that just goes beyond language. It's like a direct line to ourselves. So, what does this all mean for you? Well, that brings us to our final and maybe the most important section, finding your voice. Because this isn't just for the Mozarts or the Miles Davises of the world, it's for everyone. So the real question becomes, how can you start? How can you tap into this incredible skill? I know it might seem a little intimidating, but it's way more accessible than you probably think. The key is to start simple. First, start with a seed. Don't try to create a masterpiece from thin air. Just a few notes, a simple rhythm, that's the perfect starting point. Second, listen and respond. Remember, it's a conversation. Listen to the music. Listen to who you're playing with. And most importantly, embrace mistakes. That so-called wrong note, it's not a failure. It's an unexpected plot twist. It's an opportunity to go somewhere new, somewhere totally surprising. This reframes the whole idea in such a powerful way. The musician Christopher Dell thinks of improvisation as a type of technology, defining it as working constructively with contingency. When you see it that way, it's not just for music anymore. It's a technology for life, a way of creatively dealing with the unexpected, with whatever life throws at you. And that leaves us with one last thought. Forget music for just a second. Just think about this. What could you create in your music, in your job, in your life, if you just weren't so afraid of hitting a wrong note?